is Marci Shimoff, and welcome to the Love Your Life Summit. I am so looking forward to today's session because it's with someone that I have known for 11 years. She's become a dear friend of mine, and she is someone who loves her life completely, fully, in every way, all out. And first, let me tell you her official bio, and then I'll tell you my own personal experience with her. It's Dr. Sue Morter, and we're actually sitting in the living room of her home. It's a beautiful home that she's designed impeccably. She's got great aesthetic sense as well as just life sense. So here's the official word on Sue. Dr. Sue. Dr. Sue Morter is an internationally recognized authority on bridging science, spirit, and human possibility. She's a master practitioner, an instructor of the bioenergetic synchronization technique. It's also known as B.E.S.T technique, which is a neuro-emotional clearing and healing process that addresses subconscious interferences with the mind, body, memory, and spirit, and their influence on health and human performance. Dr. Sue has intentional living seminars, and her self-healing techniques have helped thousands of people around the world to experience greater harmony in life as they learn to master their internal experience regardless of their external environment. Dr. Sue founded the Morter Institute and Health Center in 1987, which is a multi-doctor wellness and teaching center in Indianapolis, and it's focused on cleansing and restoring the mind, body, and soul by releasing unresolved subconscious beliefs and emotions. Dr. Sue is in 4 or more, lots more documentary films, lots of films. She has spoken at the Agape Religious Center, International Center, at Kripalu Institute. She's presented for the Susan B. Komen Foundation, for TED conferences in conjunction with NASA. She's spoken at many events. She's on the internet, she's on radio, she's on television, she's at live conferences. And Dr. Sue has been called the shaman in a business suit. The shaman in a classy business suit. And all of that is true of Sue, but what I want you to know from a personal level is I've known Sue for 11 and a half years now. And it was the minute I met her, I knew that this was a special, light-filled being. She is completely in tune with how to live life 100% out. She has spent years and years working with so many people, finding out what is it that's blocking our ability to live all out, and how can we remove those blocks, and how can we really access this complete ability to love our lives. She has personally helped me deeply. I'm actually here with Sue right now because we're working on her newest book, and we're having a blast brainstorming and coming up with all these. You give her any topic to talk about and she can talk about it, so we're having a great time. She's also working on me personally, which is a huge blessing that I'm feeling so much help from. I've attended Sue's classes myself. I just think they're fabulous. And this is a woman that is, you look in her eyes, they're filled with light, and she knows how to love her life, and she knows how to help each of us love our lives. So.
Wow,
Yay,
my goodness, wow. Oh.
I know that was a really long introduction, but I tell you, she deserves it. Now I know the answer to this question, Sue, but I want you to tell everyone, are you loving your life? And has it always been that way?
Am I loving my life? I am loving my life like I didn't even know was possible to love. I didn't even know that it was possible to feel life unfolding, even to a greater degree, in my dreams than my dreams were dreaming. It's in better detail. It's in more full living color than when I would allow myself to imagine what it would be like to have the ideal life. In fact, the first time someone ever asked me, what would your ideal life be like? If you could have it any way you wanted it, and there were no rules, and you knew you couldn't fail, and it would happen, I started crying because I didn't have any idea what that would be. I didn't let myself dream. And so that, in that moment I realized I got to let myself have that in my imagination. I have to let it flow into me and dream my dream. And so I began dreaming my dream, but even when I wrote down my ideal set of circumstances and the way my life would be flowing and how it would be unfolding and the kinds of people that would be in my life and the way I would spend my day and my career, even then I didn't know it would feel like it feels until it began to actually happen. And I began to develop my ability to feel in that way. And so I would say, in short answer to your question, I love my life more than I knew was possible. And I absolutely love sharing with other people how to not only begin dreaming their dream and give themselves permission to do that, but to enhance their ability to feel it every step of the way unfolding and to allow that richness to fill them up from the inside out.
And because your background is in medicine, and your background is helping people with all of their physical issues, how did that help you see what is blocking us from living our loving our lives? I mean, what's the relationship between our physical health and the blocks that we have there and our ability to really love our life?
Yeah. Well, I had the amazing opportunity to be born into a family that was focused on natural health care. And so I've been in the healthcare conversation since I can remember. And it was all based on quantum science and the power of belief and your thoughts and that you create your reality. And so it was natural health care. I've never taken a medication. I've never gone to the doctor for an ailment and been given an antibiotic to heal me and done that thing. I've never done that. And I've gotten sick, but I've healed. And so the focus and the inspiration, the influence has always been how to approach it from a natural standpoint. And I've been in practice working with people for 25 years doing just that. And what I have found over the course of time is that everyone ultimately has a bottom line that is a component related to their ailment, either their disease or their discontent or their pain patterns, whatever the case may be, that is of an emotional nature, whether they know it or not. It may be held at the conscious level, it may be held at the subconscious level, they may know what their deal is that they're chewing on and that they're not letting go of, or they may not. And more often than not, people aren't aware of what it is that is holding them back. Rarely are we upset for the reasons that we think we are. There's usually something underneath that really has a hold of us. And so in identifying those things with people and allowing people to develop ways of getting in touch with themselves in a deeper sense, what that leads to is a better sense of releasing that which is essential for me to experience my freedom, for someone to experience a greater sense of love or a greater sense of success or a greater sense of victory over our experiences in life. We have to access a part of ourselves that we weren't in touch with before, that keeps us from being able to navigate life the way that we're intended to be able to.
And so, I mean, I know you have this model of understanding that our ability to love our lives is contingent upon this flow of energy. Can you talk a little bit about the model that we've been talking about?
Sure.
For the last 3 days.
Right. Well, basically, the premise is that everything in all of creation is nature. Everything in all of nature is energy. And that energy is in the human being, it's flowing through us constantly. And it's supposed to flow in a way that allows life to unfold naturally. In other words, life is supposed to be enjoyed. It is intended to be joy-filled. It's intended to work for you. It's intended to flow in a graceful and easy way. And if that isn't happening, there's a reason. And what we're interested in is the reason. Because once we remove that reason, by nature, we would flow and fall into love with our life experience. We would embrace what is happening. We would know that it is happening for our benefit. And this is a place where people get really stymied. That if everything is energy and energy is flowing, there is a basic premise that everything that is happening for a reason. And usually there are things happening in our lives that we don't like so much, and we don't think it's supposed to be happening. And what we know is that it is essential for us to look from another perspective. It is essential for us to look at the circumstances in our lives from the perspective of, Everything is energy, and energy is flowing through me, and it is all 100% in support of my unfoldment into who I'm supposed to be. It's all in support of me getting to know who I am and trusting who I am and getting to know my power, my empowerment, my ability to rise to circumstances that I didn't even think I could. And when we see that it is happening from that perspective, what begins to happen is we see that what is happening is supporting me, therefore it's on my side, it's not against me. And when I see from that perspective, I begin to embrace, wow, if this is happening in my life and its intention is to reveal to me my empowerment, then I just need to do whatever I need to do to rise to the occasion. And it usually just means trusting myself more. It usually means trusting my gut, listening to my heart, following my personal passions, following what is joy-filled. And when we make decisions from those places, we begin to create a life that is in alignment with our authenticity, rather than creating a life that feels smart or that will create certainty or will create security. Oftentimes those things that we think will create security don't necessarily lead to our happiness and to our fulfillment. They just lead to safety. And we're safe but we're miserable. And so what we must do is learn that now that we've developed a skill set on how to create safety for myself, now how do I take that skill set and add some more ingredients to the recipe and add into it what would my heart's desire do right now? What would my heart's passion choose in this moment? What if I knew that I wouldn't fail and I knew that it would work somehow, even if I don't know how, what would I choose right now? And when we begin choosing in that way, lo and behold, it begins to create a life that works more gracefully, more naturally, more automatically for us. Even though the mind thinks, no, I can't do that, I have to do the smart thing, I have to do the safe thing. It doesn't mean it's not smart and not safe to do the other things. Safety shows up in other ways for us.
So a lot of people might think, I would sure love to quit my job and go do something else, because that's what my heart tells me to do, but I've got a family to feed. I can't do that. So what do you do with that kind of thing?
Well, the first thing that I recommend with people, whether I've been working with someone who's in a pain pattern or working with someone who's in an emotionally painful situation like what you've just described, is to say that first things first. First we must fulfill ourselves. We must feel the energy of fulfillment. We must allow this energy to flow through us. And so we keep the same job, we do that, but we find other ways to notice how we feel joy, how we access that place inside of us. And what begins to happen is we then begin to access it regularly. We begin to when we're driving down the road and we're not necessarily in a joyful circumstance, we begin remembering joyful circumstances that we've been in, and we re-engage or reignite or reactivate that same energy flow through our body that we would be experiencing if we were in a joyful situation. And we can use our memory and our imagination to do those kinds of things. When we do that, we activate certain energy in our body, and the body then becomes familiar with that energy pattern. And then when it is familiar with that energy pattern, here's what happens. Oftentimes, we find fulfillment in the very job that we were in, yesterday. We're in that same job today, but we're approaching it from a different perspective. We're seeing that while this doesn't make me happy, life isn't supposed to make me happy. Life is here as a backdrop, as a background, as a playground, as an obstacle course that we put in place in order to build muscle, to build certain aspects of who we are. And it builds our ability to reach inside and discover the happiness that is inside of me, regardless of my environment providing it for me. And once we discover that, we begin seeing life differently. So it doesn't necessarily have to change. We change. We change. We see it differently. We proceed differently. We have a different experience. So fulfillment can happen. I contend I would be fulfilled doing just about anything on the planet because of the adventure that I would create out of it while I was doing it. And that's what I'm interested in everyone discovering. It doesn't mean we have to stay in the job that we're not happy with. Maybe it's not our destiny. Maybe we chose that job out of our security. But what happens along the way is we develop ourselves in a way that another opportunity unfolds as we proceed down the path. that perhaps will even pay better than the job that we're in today. But we're not vibrating at an energetic frequency that would attract that job to us until we begin from the inside out.
Yeah, it's the same thing I found when I was working on Happy for No Reason. That in Happy for No Reason, it was all about how you create an inner state of joy, of happiness. When you raise your inner vibration, when you raise your inner state of happiness, your environment changes. Different job opportunities come your way, different relationships show up. So it's about changing your own energy
you're
field.
different.
Because you're different.
Because
So,
you're different. Yes.
so what? Give us an example of how you've done this. An example of how you've done that exact thing that we're talking about, where you were maybe in a situation where you weren't that happy and you were introducing an energy that you remembered or imagined of joy, and then how that changed things for you.
Well, it's interesting. I began from what I refer to as the backside of the model. I began by figuring out what I didn't want and staking a claim on that, and it started igniting some power in me that was more strengthening and creating, some fierceness and courage and that kind of thing. I was in circumstances that weren't fulfilling. I wasn't feeling fulfillment, and so I began saying, you know what? I'm not going to do this, and I'm not going to do that, and I don't want this, and I don't want that. And that begins a process, and that's where most of us begin. That's where most of us that are not fulfilled, that's where we are. We're saying things like that. You'll notice that you hear yourself saying, I don't want this, I don't like that, I'm not interested in this. And then the very next thing that has to happen is we have to follow it up with what I do want. We have to begin the sentence. And what I'd rather have is this. What I would rather be experiencing is that. And then the very next thing is to start feeling what that would feel like if I did have that. And
part of that is you go back to a memory of feeling fulfilled in a particular way that might be similar to how you would feel if what you were wanting happened.
Right. So you say, if it did happen, what would I feel? Well, I would feel joy, I would feel uplifted. So when in my life have I felt joyful and uplifted before? And in my situation, it was very funny. It took me back to high school and college when I was in theater, and I would be in all these different parts and plays, and I would just be going after it, playing out this character that was, very different from my own personality, but I would just have a ball doing that. And I would remember how I felt inside when the group of people would laugh, or we would be able to have an experience together, and it just felt elating to me. And so I just began practicing that feeling, that freedom, that expression, that joy rising out of me. I would breathe in and out of my body, which, we can talk about some of those things that we can do that stir this energy flow, that stir it and reactivate it in us. And that reactivation brings it to life again. It brings it to life as a real possibility in our life experience. And so I would just be moving along like that. Another thing that I would do is pay attention to how I was feeling on the inside when I was with my dogs. I would run with my dogs in the woods every day, and I would just, our pets uplift us, they bring joy out of us, we love them unconditionally, and so because we don't have an expectation of them other than that, it's a fulfilling relationship, which is something to take note of. If we could have that same unconditional approach in all of our relationships, they tend to go a lot better. And so I would pay attention to how I was feeling on the inside when I was in that joyful state, running in the woods, looking down at my dogs, they're looking up at me, we're just, it's total bliss. I would notice, oh my gosh, I feel so free in my body in this moment. I feel alive, and I can feel the energy running from above my head down through my body and connecting with nature. It just felt so right. And so when I was in an airport traveling around the world, and it's as far from a natural environment as you can get with the sounds and the noises and the announcements and people and the cement and everything that happens, I would just reclaim that experience that I would have in the woods with my dogs. And I would relive it, not just think about it as a memory, but get into the physiological state as if it was happening right now, as if I was in that. And what I began doing is giving myself practice to be in that vibration. And everything else, because everything in all of creation is nature, it is naturally energy, it is all energy flowing, everything in nature is energy. the energy is very significant that we're carrying around inside of us, the energy that we're holding on to. So if we're holding on to grudges or holding on to analysis or predictions or predetermining what we think we should do, we're not carrying around the energy of joy in that same moment. We're not carrying around the energy of forgiveness or compassion or love. And so as I would be sitting there doing these things, I would allow my body to be resonating at a vibrational frequency where opportunity exists. Because everything being energy, energy vibrating at different frequencies, there's a certain energetic frequency where people operate, where they are very accident prone. Mm-hmm. They're very failure, quote unquote, prone. They're mm-hmm. very things aren't working out prone. They're very disease prone. And there's another bandwidth where people operate, where possibilities exist, and where healing happens, and where love expresses, and where relationships work. And I'm interested in creating that vibration inside of me where those possibilities occur.
So here's the thing though, when people are feeling in pain or sick or depressed or low energy or their life isn't working, that's the hardest time to have the inspiration mm-hmm. to be able to do that.
Right.
So what do you say to people that are saying, well, yeah, that sounds like a really good thing, but I just don't even have it in me. I'm feeling too much pain, or I'm feeling too depressed to rouse, to do that practice that you said.
Yeah. You know what is amazing, Marci? I had the deepest sense of joy I have ever experienced in my life in the midst of the darkest moments of my life. The deepest depression that I would have, bigger than I ever would have imagined myself being in. I had just lost my mother, who I was not at all prepared to lose. Mm-hmm. I was not dealing well with that. I was deep in the grief of that. I was in the loss of a relationship of 9 years that did not end in a pleasant way. And it was the first time I'd ever ended a relationship in a non-amicable way. So I didn't know how to deal with conflict in that way where love had been so present before. Mm-hmm. And in the midst of that, I lost my 2 dogs that I had experienced so much joy with. And I was dealing with the loss of them in an unexpected way, all at the same time. This was all happening within the same year or so. And one day I was walking through this house, in fact, right through this room, mm-hmm. and into the bedroom, and I just happened past the bed, and I fell over onto the bed in just deep, deep pain. Felt like I was falling into the deepest, darkest well, mm-hmm. and I had never experienced anything like that. And I grabbed myself and fell over, and I just cried and cried and cried, and just felt like I was losing it, losing my mind, losing everything. And in that moment, there was this embracing that happened. There was this intimate experience that I had with myself that I never would have dreamt would happen in a moment like that. But I was allowing myself to have my pain. I was just allowing myself to have it. And my mind would have never thought that that would be a good idea, because what if we get stuck there? What if I let myself feel how sad I actually am, what if I stay there and never come out because I feel bad enough already? If there's even more deep sadness underneath all that, yikes, I don't know if I could handle that. But nature isn't designed that way, to give us more than we can handle. If we would allow ourselves to go there, then it will release. Then it will release. And that was what happened with me in that moment. What happened was I let myself just have it. And it only lasted about, I don't know, maybe 5 minutes, I don't know, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. But in the midst of that, I felt a sense of joy right in the middle of my crying. It was like, oh my God. It was as if I was saying, I must love myself enough to be here for myself in this moment. And I've never really been here for myself in this kind of a way, to this degree. And I felt loved. Even though it was just me loving me, and I thought it would be really great if somebody else was around here in this moment to be loving on me.
Yeah.
But that's not happening. So what did happen was better than that, because I found a part of myself that I didn't even know existed. And in that, letting myself have what I had, a sense of joy rose up in me, like, oh my God, I'm not in this alone. I'm really not. I thought I was, but when I hooked up my head with my own heart, it was like, oh, we're in this together. And I began to feel a very deep sense of security and of safety and of being loved. And I'll say that again. I mean, I was being loved even though there was nobody in the room. You know, it was.
And this came about just by you fully being open to the pain that you were feeling.
Yeah.
And had you done that before?
I hadn't personally done it. I've been able to help lots and lots of other people to do that. And in a doctor-patient relationship or in a guidance coach kind of, you know, life circumstance, family member, friendship, I've been able to do it with other people. But it hadn't come around for me personally until, in that way, until that moment. And so I knew, my intellect knew, other people have done this and it has worked for them. And there I was in the middle of that experience. You know, it's different when you know a theory, but when you're having the experience of it, it's like, whoa, this is big stuff. This is really huge. And it is tremendously, tremendously freeing. The point is, I got into my body with it. I wasn't just in my head about it. And that is an integral part of this model, this conversation that we're having, this perspective that we're talking about, is that we live in our heads. We think all the time, we debate all the time, we doubt all the time, we self-judge, we judge others, we beat ourselves up. We're constantly in an editing, evaluation kind of way of being about our lives instead of just living them. When we were, 1 year old and 2 years old, those little toddlers are beaming in their eyes and they're glowing in their faces for a reason. And it's because they're not saying, oh, you stupid toddler, all the other toddlers are walking by now, you should be walking. They just fall down and get up again and go toward the shiny objects and have fun. They're just there. And similarly, when we look at the trees outside the window, they don't try to compete with the other trees. They don't debate whether they should have been a pine tree or, if they should have their leaves on by now because all the other maple trees have their leaves on by now. And
they're like bloomers.
Right, on behind schedule.
I like bloomer.
They don't do that. They don't do that. They just be tree. And if we could learn to just be who we are, we would notice that we were loving ourselves more, and that translates to loving our lives more. We can't love our lives until we're loving ourselves so much that we're not even editing or auditing whether we're good or not, whether we should or not. We're just being ourselves.
Yeah, but how do you do that? I mean, it sounds great. I mean, okay, so how?
How do we do it? All that it requires is on an intellectual level, is trusting our heart, trusting our gut. And if we can make tiny choices, trusting our gut, I've worked with tens of thousands of people over the last 25 years, hundreds of thousands, if you include the people that I've spoken to in large audience groups. And what I've never heard anyone say is, I had a gut feeling and I went with it, and boy, do I regret it. Nobody's ever said that to me, ever. Never, ever been said. But you know what I've heard? Hundreds, if not thousands of times. Oh, I knew it. I had a feeling, but I didn't want to rock the boat, or I didn't want to be the one to question the authorities or whatever. And so I overrode it, and man, boy, do I regret it.
Yeah.
I hear it all the time. So, but do we do the math? Do we give that credence? Do we honor that to the degree that we could? Well, to me, hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds and thousands of people saying, I trusted my gut and I went with it, and wow, yay. Do we allow that to be significant enough in our minds when it comes time to make a decision, or when you're driving down the road and you have a hunch, you have a gut feeling, do you listen? Do you take action on it? So if you could just start taking action on the tiniest little things that are occurring, the ones that aren't going to make or break your life, what you're going to do is you're going to build constitution at the subconscious level that it is safe to trust my gut. We just don't think it's safe because we've never done it enough to build confidence, to build evidence that it's okay to do that. So the subconscious thinks, no, 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 no. We only ever make decisions based on logic, based on statistics, based on what's safe, based on advice from others. We don't make those decisions based on our intuition, our inspiration, or our own gut feeling. And if we could do that, then if we could just do that in small ways, then we begin to build evidence. We begin to build a repertoire of energetic vibe that is stored at this subconscious memory level that allows us to, the next time we're in a situation and it's coming up, to choose from that place and just say, it's going to turn out or it's not. But I'm okay either way.
So what I've heard you say so far is that the way that we can start loving ourselves more and loving our lives more and be in this flow, you said three things that I've heard. One is you can trust yourself. And by learning to trust your vibe and go with it, you build that muscle.
Yes.
And you start honoring yourself more.
Yes.
The second thing is you can actually feel whatever it is you've been resisting. You can feel completely that pain or whatever it is you have not been willing to feel in the past.
Yes.
And the way you do that is through just doing it.
You just give yourself a moment. You give yourself a moment, and because so often people will say, I'm upset, but they don't know they can do anything about that upset. They just say, I'm really upset about this situation. And then the next thing out of their mouth is, and I don't know what to do. And they skip right over the opportunity to feel, to be tender with themselves, to be intimate, to give themselves a moment that they would give their best friend. They would give their friend some attention. They would actually move into it and be compassionate and feel what that friend is going through and be with it. But we don't do that when it comes to ourselves nearly as much. So it's just about giving yourself a moment. When you're laying in bed at night before you fall asleep, to just be in your heart with yourself. Breathe into your heart with this situation and know and feel your sense of okayness even though you're thinking about this situation. If we can feel a sense of okayness at a conscious level in the physical body, at the same time that we're thinking about something that's upsetting, we can begin to break that pattern up and allow the energy to flow again. It's gotten blocked around this whole topic.
So here's the thing, because the one thing you said is feel what it is you're feeling, feel the pain that you're feeling.
Yeah.
And the third thing that you had said, actually, the first thing that you had said, was that remember a time when you had the joy or the experience of freedom, and imagine that in this moment now where you might not be feeling it. So those are different, very different experiences, because one is, I'm going to just go into this pain right now, and I'm going to feel it the way it is right now, not trying to change it, not trying to do anything to it.
Right.
The other is, I'm going to remember a time when I felt joy and freedom, and I'm going to bring it into this moment.
I'm going to invite that in.
And I'm going to invite that in. How do you know when you're doing the one where I'm just completely embracing it and being with it, and the other one where I'm bringing in something from a different experience than what I'm having?
You know what will happen? If you listen to yourself, if you just check in, you'll know which one needs to happen in this moment. There isn't a mentally driven formula that you do this and you do this and then you do this and you do this. It's an organic process that we have to work with. And this, as human beings, we need to learn more about how to be human rather than how to be this structured, individual that
ABC.
follows this particular rule set, because nature doesn't operate that way. And we are nature. And we're not supposed to operate that way when it comes to our own healing, when it comes to our own life unfoldment, when it comes to knowing who we are. And so I would say that if the pain is overwhelming in a moment, allow yourself to feel your pain. And after you're feeling your pain for just a few moments, and you'll feel a connection that happens there that wasn't really happening on that before, then you imagine a time when you had gotten through something before, or you were in a joyful state, and you just invite that to be a goal. Not that you try to force yourself to get to that, but you just hold it out there as an inspiration, realizing that at some point I'm interested in lining these two things up again. You invite it into the recipe and allow it to begin to stir, to percolate with everything else that's happening in here.
I know that people come to you with all kinds of problems. They come to you with physical issues, they come to you with emotional issues, and you basically say the same thing, which is all disease, all problems, all emotional, mental, and physical problems boil down to this one core problem, and there is one core solution. So we've just summed that up, what the one core problem and one core solution is.
Well, the issue is that we have had some kind of experience somewhere along the way in our lives that has not been completely metabolized by us. It hasn't been completely understood, or it hasn't been completely resolved. And so the energy that is hooked up in all that unresolved emotional upset is still in there, having an impact on us, whether we realize it or not. It's having an influence on how our nervous system can function. It moves us into more of a defense physiology and keeps us out of a healing flow, a creative genius flow, a loving life kind of capacity. And those two things are at odds with one another. And so it has to be accessed, it has to be resolved, it has to be completed in order for us to move to the place that we are intended to be living. And we do that by, we don't have to go back and revisit the story and rehash out all the details, but we do have to get in touch with how we feel when we think about that situation. And we have to breathe with that feeling, loving presence with ourselves. If we want to love our lives, we have to begin with loving ourselves. And the way we begin with loving ourselves is not only just a mental and emotional decision, it's a physical state that we can be in. When we are loving ourselves, it can show up like, okay, I've got this situation with a family member or some past circumstance in my life that was painful. A relationship that ended, very painfully, or the loss of a mother that didn't, you weren't ready for. These kinds of things that I shared earlier. And so we have to go into, when I think about that situation, how do I feel? Well, it clamps me down here, or it gives me a knot in my stomach, or it makes my heart pound, or creates tension in my back or my shoulders. And what we have to do is breathe loving presence into that area of the body that is screaming for our attention. There's a reason that particular area is bothering you relative to the given topic, which is a whole conversation in and of itself. All we have to know in the meantime is what I need to do is just breathe loving presence. And that means how you would be with an innocent child. Your child or your niece or your nephew or some little neighbor kid that you're just in love with, and they're having a hard time, or they're crying, or they're upset, and you're not trying to make them be okay, but you're just bringing this loving, enveloping kind of energy present for them. The way you would feel in that situation, that's the way to feel with yourself. Of all people, of all places to begin, it has to begin within. It has to begin from this point out. And so that is loving presence. And then you have to breathe. It's said that there are a certain number of breaths required to resolve any situation. Let's just say it's 1,008 breaths. And so if we've pocketed this situation, we're not holding it in our consciousness and breathing loving presence with it. We stuck it in a pocket, and we're not going to talk about it. We don't want to think about it. Just get it out of my life, get it away from me. And it doesn't work that way. There is no away. Everything is involved in your life, everything. And so we have to learn how to be lovingly present with everything that is. And so that energy that we wanted to pocket and throw back there and get rid of, we just bring it up here. We don't have to go into the whole story. We don't have to figure it out. It's not a head job that's going to fix this. It's a heart project that will dissolve this back into nature, dissolve it into working for you. And what gets to happen in that moment is you get to know your heart a little better. Like, even in the face of this situation, I can be loving. Cool, I'm pretty rocking in the heart department. So what happens is we drop in, we drop through, and we begin to build a relationship with our body. And this is what we don't have. We don't have a relationship with how we are physically feeling, because we override millions of impulses every day that are constantly trying to guide us toward what is most authentic for us. But we're so conditioned to do the right thing, or to do the smart thing, or to do what the family tradition has been, or what the social appropriateness is, or the cultural norm. We are so hooked into that we don't even realize that we are override, deny, shut down, forget, bowl right over the top of it. And so we don't have a context for what we really want, what we really feel. And that is constantly trying to rise up to our consciousness. And we either shut it off, stuff it down, or whatever. we can build that relationship by speaking our truth in just tiny little ways. You know how often we say, when someone says, "Are you okay?" And we'll say, "Yeah, I'm fine." But we know we almost can grasp that there's something I'd like to say here, but I don't want to say it.
Well, and a lot of people have been trained, the whole law of attraction thing, people are trained to not say anything negative. So how do you deal with that? If in fact somebody says, "I feel fine," and you really don't, I mean, how do you feel and you don't really feel fine, what do you do?
There's a way to use the law of attraction, which is, think in positive terms, dream your dream, elevate yourself, and these kinds of things, and still allow yourself to feel what you feel. To be responsible with our life experience, we have to say, I would answer, if I wasn't feeling fine and somebody asked me that, and I knew the idea of the law of attraction and I wanted to, have it all work for me, all at the same time, I would say, I'm not feeling really great right now because I have this happening, or I'm just feeling something in me that I don't really even know what it is. I just feel a little disconnected today, or I feel a little funky, or introspective, or out of sorts, or I've been feeling a little down lately, and I know that it is serving something in me, and I'm curious and interested in what I'm trying to learn, and how I could be more present with myself. I'll say something like that, and then move it toward the fact that whatever I'm feeling is okay. And when I know that whatever I'm feeling is okay, that's actually closer to what the law of attraction is trying to teach us than to just, I don't feel okay, but I'm not going to say that. I'm going to stuff that down here and say, "Oh, I'm fine." Because we're building inauthenticity in that way. And it's like a bypass of what integration is all about. And so we're going to build a life that looks great and feels terrible. If we do that.
And a lot of people have. I mean, spiritual bypass is rampant.
That's very painful.
So you've seen people using these principles in your programs, in your courses, in your work. What are can you tell us a story, maybe one story about how someone's life has transformed through using this? I mean, I know besides your own. Let's find somebody else. I want to hear someone else's example.
There are so many stories, and it's so funny because I so often see these transformative things that I don't even, miraculous things happen, and I don't carry it around in my head as, another miracle today. It's just the way it is. It's kind of like it's to be expected, and it is shifting. So in 25 years of practice, I would say that on a regular basis, people are finding things that they're able to say and do that they were unable to say or do previous in their lives. People that there is one story just popped into my head. This was just not from a pain pattern was the reason I started seeing her. She came in, and yet what we found was that it wasn't. We didn't have to investigate the low back and see. We did to see if there was anything physical happening there, physically wrong. There wasn't. We did these tests. We did these X-rays. We did stuff, and it wasn't. There wasn't anything. There wasn't any physical explanation. That would be one of those situations where you went to the doctor and the doctor said, "I'm fine," but they can't. But I still hurt, but I'm fine. So luckily, we have another whole realm of things to investigate there. So what we knew was that it's not a physical oriented pain pattern, even though it physically hurts. There was something else at play. And what we found was that, and I didn't even know this, but I was working with her, we were clearing some of these types of things, and she realized that she had been living a non-truthful life situation and wasn't even really realizing that was affecting her to the degree that it was. She had gotten married, and at the wedding went through the whole thing. The whole family's coming in. Everything goes into a wedding. It's a lot of expectation there. There's a lot of and when it came time after the wedding to sign the marriage certificate, she couldn't sign it. She couldn't sign it. So she didn't. But she didn't tell anybody. So everybody thought, that she was completely, married. And years had gone by, like 5 or 7 years had gone by. And this was really, bothering her. It was really eating away at her because it was a lie that she was telling. They didn't even realize that she was telling a lie. And so she was, just by getting in touch with this part of her, she found the courage to bring that forward and have these conversations with her family and so forth. She was with the man, and they were having children, raising a family. It was all great. She wanted to be with him. She just didn't want to be married in that way. And so she was able to step into that and have it unfold. And of course, the back pain and health conditions go away because we're not locking it up in some kind of illusion or some kind of discord.